Have you ever stopped at a gas station late at night and felt like something was waiting for you? Not just the usual unease of an empty lot, but the kind of pressure in the air that makes your instincts scream. Tonight's story will make you think twice about stopping to fill up on your way home. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, because the next nightmare might be closer than you think. This account comes from Daniel Foster, who was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico when it happened. Daniel worked two jobs, warehouse shifts during the week and part-time delivery on weekends. His schedule left him drained and often driving home past midnight. That night, he just dropped off his last delivery around 1:30 a.m., eager to collapse into bed. But as he merged onto the empty highway, the fuel light blinked on. He cursed under his breath. Running on fumes, he couldn't risk stalling out before morning. The nearest station was one he barely noticed before, a small, weathered place tucked off an old service road. Its neon sign flickered weakly, buzzing in the silence. The lot was empty, lit only by harsh overhead floodlights that threw long shadows across cracked pavement. The pumps looked older than Daniel himself. Something about it set him on edge. It wasn't just that it was deserted, it was the silence. Too still, too absolute, like the world was holding its breath. He pulled up, killed the engine, and stepped out. The crunch of his boots on gravel echoed louder than it should have. He swiped his card, lifted the pump, and tried to focus on the rhythmic click of the meter. But then movement caught his eye. A figure. Tall, lean, gliding along the far side of the building, half hidden in shadow. The way he moved was deliberate, careful, the way someone moves it when they don't want to be seen. Daniel froze, hand tightening on the pump handle. He told himself it was just someone cutting through the lot, maybe a drifter, maybe another late-night worker. But his gut twisted. Something about the man's stride was too controlled, too purposeful. He capped the tank and forced himself toward the convenience store, needing the light, needing another person. Inside, the fluorescent bulbs hummed and flickered. The place looked almost abandoned, aisles half empty, freezer doors fogged. Behind the counter, a teenager sat hunched over his phone, barely glancing up. Daniel grabbed a bottle of water just to give his hands something to do. He slid it across the counter. $2, the kid mumbled, eyes never leaving his screen. Daniel paid quickly and glanced toward the door. The figure was gone. The silence outside felt thicker when he stepped back onto the lot. He quickened his pace, gravel crunching beneath him like gunshots in the stillness. That's when he saw him. The man was standing near the rear bumper of Daniel's car, half shrouded in shadow, his face hidden but his eyes unmistakable, cold, unblinking, locked on him. Daniel's stomach dropped. His instincts screamed to get inside the car, but before he could move, footsteps echoed behind him. Quick. Close. He spun around, and there the man was, just an arm's length away. The smell hit first. Stale smoke, sweat, something metallic. Then, the silence. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared. Daniel's throat grew dry. His body screamed to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. Finally, the man leaned in, voice low and jagged, like gravel dragged across metal. "Got some change?" The words should have been harmless, mundane. But in the silence, delivered with that stare, they felt like a threat. Daniel fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a few crumpled bills, but before he could hand them over, the man grabbed his wrist with surprising force. His other hand pressed something cold and sharp against Daniel's side. "Not here. You're driving. We're going west. You do exactly what I say, or this parking lot's your grave." Daniel's chest tightened. The knife never wavered as the stranger shoved him toward the driver's seat. His hands shook so badly he almost dropped the keys, but the engine roared to life. "GPS," the man ordered. "Use it." Daniel's voice cracked. "Where?" The man laughed, a hollow, broken sound that raised the hairs on Daniel's neck. They pulled out of the station, the road stretching endlessly ahead. Every mile was suffocating, the knife close, the man's stare burning into him. Daniel's mind raced for a plan, but all he could hear was the steady rasp of the stranger's breathing. Then, things started to warp. The dashboard lights flickered, the radio crackled, though it was off. His GPS map glitched, roads twisting into impossible shapes before snapping back. At a stoplight, Daniel caught sight of another vehicle in the mirror, a pickup truck approaching fast. His pulse surged. Maybe help. He slammed the gas, jerking the car into the intersection. The sudden move startled the stranger. Loosening his grip just enough, Daniel shoved his arm, the knife clattering to the floorboards. The man snarled, voice fracturing, echoing like two voices layered. Daniel's eyes darted to the windshield and froze. The man's reflection in the glass wasn't snarling. It was smiling. Wide. Too wide. Daniel's stomach turned to ice. He slammed the horn, desperate to draw attention. The pickup screeched to a stop beside him, its driver leaning out. "Hey, you okay?" Daniel tried to shout, but the passenger seat was empty. The man was gone. The knife was gone. But yet, he swears he could still feel the hot breath against his ear. Police came. They searched. Nothing. No intruder. No weapon. No trace. Weeks passed. Daniel changed his locks, added cameras, even bought a gun. But none of it mattered. Because sometimes in the corner of his vision, he'd still catch glimpses. Reflections that didn't match. A smile where there shouldn't be one. And every time he passes that gas station, neon buzzing faintly in the dark, he swears he sees someone waiting in the shadows near the pumps. Have you ever pulled into a gas station after midnight and felt like you just stepped off the map? Tonight's story will make you think twice about who or what you let into your car. This account comes from Elena Reyes, a remote help desk tech who lives alone in Bridgeport, Connecticut. She says the thing about getting older is that you expect the disappointments, but you never expect the silence that trails behind them. 9 to 5 looks different when you do it from a one-bedroom with thin walls and neighbors who argue through midnight. Elena's days blurred into headsets, ticket numbers, and lukewarm coffee. Weekends, she drove, anywhere, just to feel like she could still point herself at a horizon and go. 3 autumns ago, she drove to Providence to meet a guy she'd been messaging for months. His profile felt like permission to hope. Sharp jokes, soft eyes, playlists full of songs she'd once loved in college. In person, everything sagged. The pauses got heavy, his phone lit up for someone else, and the goodbye was a handshake that felt like a receipt. She didn't cry on the way back. She turned the radio up too loud and let the interstate swallow the noise in her head. Somewhere after 1 a.m., the fuel light chimed and flashed amber. She exhaled a curse and took the next sign. Exit 41, food, fuel. The station sat alone past the ramp. Northway Fuel, its canopy lights buzzing in a wet halo. A single semi idled by the diesel pumps, the low vibration carrying through the concrete and into her bones. She parked at the far pump under the brightest light and stepped out into air that smelled like rain and old rubber. Inside the store, through fingerprint-smudged glass, the clerk's face was blue from a phone screen. She set the pump, clipped the handle to run, and hugged herself against the chill. That's when she saw the girl. Right at the margin where the floodlights failed and the line of scrub pines began, a barefoot girl appeared, stumbling like each step was a negotiation. Her hair hung in snarls, and her clothes looked torn in a way that wasn't fashion. The girl lifted her head and locked eyes with Elena. Not the glassy, unfocused stare of someone drunk. Terrified. Pleading. The girl bolted toward her, breath breaking in little shards. Please, they're coming back. Please, help me. Elena's whole body tensed. A scream rose and got stuck beneath her ribs. The girl couldn't have been more than 20. Scrapes laddered her arms, a bruise bloomed across one side of her ribcage where her hand pressed like breathing hurt. Without thinking, she hit unlock. The passenger door clicked. The girl dove inside, curling to the floorboard like she was trying to fold herself out of the world. "Drive," she whispered, voice shaking. "Not here. Not yet. Please, go." Aleda's thumb hovered over 911. The girl saw and grabbed her wrist with a strength that shocked her. "No, please, just drive." The grip was ice. Logic fought terror. Call the police. Don't get involved. But there are moments when your brain loses to your eyes. The girl's fear was so bright, it burned through reason. Elena started the engine. She swung the car toward the exit, then headlights cut across the lot. A dark SUV rolled under the canopy, slow, deliberate. 3 men got out. Even from across the concrete, Elena saw the way they moved, heads up, scanning. One tapped a bat against his palm like warming up. The girl folded herself lower. That's them. If Elena pulled to the ramp, the SUV would see them. If she stayed, she was a pinned butterfly. She parked hard by the storefront, shoved her door open, and ran inside. The clerk jerked up, blinking. His hand hovered over his phone. "Call the cops. There's a girl, hurt, outside." He nodded, fumbled, finally stabbed at 3 numbers. Elena looked back through the glass. The men were talking to the truck driver, gesturing. One pointed toward the far row of pumps where Elena had been a minute ago. Then, the girl made a choice. She exploded out of the car, bare feet slapping wet pavement, and sprinted for the tree line. Shouts fractured the quiet. The men surged after her, disappearing into the black seam of woods. "Hurry!" Elena shouted, but her voice sounded like it belonged to a smaller version of herself. She ran outside. The line of pines swallowed sound. Her flashlight app jittered across trunks, catching the white flash of a shoulder, a swing of hair, then nothing. The woods felt endless, like a space designed to steal depth. The rain smell sharpened into earth and cold. By the time she staggered back, blue and red cut the night open. Patrol cars, officers with flashlights, a K-9 team disappearing into trees. Elena spilled the story in snags and rushes. The girl, the SUV, the bat, the chase. They listened. They spread out. They found nothing. No SUV, no shoe impressions, no torn clothing, no girl. Giving her statement, Elena watched one officer's eyes flick to another's. A look that wasn't cruel so much as procedural patience. Barefoot, bruised, chased by 3 men? In the rain? Yes, you saw it? I did. We'll keep looking. 2 days later, Elena went back with a coffee she didn't drink. The clerk sighed when he saw her. "You're still thinking about it. You called, right? You saw her." He hesitated. "I called. The cops showed me footage the next day. To reassure me." Elena's mouth drew dry. "What footage?" "Security," he swallowed. "They said, look, I'm not saying I believe this. It only showed you, alone out by your car, running to the woods by yourself." The words landed like a punch without sound. Elena laughed once, hollow, like the noise could make the world revert. "That's impossible." He raised his hands, apologetic. "I know what I think I saw, but the tape. It's just you." For nights afterwards, Elena dreamed of wet leaves and breath misting in cold air. She woke with the sensation of a hand around her wrist. "Not yet. Please, just go." Weeks turned to months. She kept driving by exit 41, parking under the same light, the canopy buzzing like a neon beehive, watching the black rope of tree line. The truckers changed, the clerk changed, the weather changed, The woods did not. On a rain-silvered Thursday in November, a state trooper knocked on her apartment door. We canvassed the area. A few years back, there were reports. 2 girls, missing. Nobody could link them to the station definitively, no witnesses willing to go on record. Elena stared at the trooper's pen. "So, you think—" He can't say. He looked sorry in a way that didn't help. "But if you see anything again, call." She still goes. Maybe once a month now. She sits with her hands wrapped around a paper cup until the heat dies, watching the edge where light dissolves into woods. Sometimes a semi idles, sometimes not. Sometimes her camera app glints a reflection on glass that looks for a second like a bare foot. Sometimes her phone screen flickers as if something tries to draw words there. Every so often, as the clock tips past 2, she hears it. Not a sound so much as a shape inside silence. A girl's whisper folding into the hum of lights. "Please drive." Elena doesn't know if she saw a ghost or a girl swallowed by the world because no one was fast enough. She only knows that the line between the two is thinner than headlights on wet asphalt, and that if she had that moment again, she would still unlock the door. Because some people are running from things we will never see, and sometimes the only proof they ever existed is the way your hand still hurts where they held on.
Some gas stations feel like they were built in the wrong place. Too quiet, too isolated, too heavy with silence. Tonight's story isn't just about working the night shift. It's about what happens when that silence starts listening back. This account comes from Maya Larson, who, at 23, took a job she thought would just be a paycheck. Instead, it gave her something she still hasn't shaken years later. Maya grew up in southern Oregon, a town where Main Street shut down by 8 p.m. and night felt like a curtain that sealed everything off. After dropping out of college and working odd retail jobs, she landed the graveyard shift at Route 9 Fuel, a squat little station crouched between the highway and a stretch of dense pine forest. It looked ordinary enough. Buzzing lights, a chipped ice machine, the smell of burnt coffee seeping from the mini-mart. But at night, Maya said, it didn't feel like a place. It felt like something waiting. The owner, a wiry man named Mr. Greaves, interviewed her while leaning against the lottery machine. When she asked if nights ever got rough, he laughed, showing too many yellow teeth. "Sweetheart, nobody comes through after midnight but truckers and drunks. Easiest money you'll ever make. Keep the coffee fresh, stock shelves, and—" His voice dropped a little. "Lock the bathroom after 12. That last part made her blink. "Why?" "Trust me," he said, already waving her off. "Just do it." The first week was fine. The hours shredded her body clock, but the work itself was light. A few customers before midnight, then long stretches where she sat behind the counter reading, letting the cooler's hum fill the silence. But silence has weight. By the end of the week, she swore it pressed against her skin like humidity. The fluorescents buzzed too loud. Her reflection in the glass looked a second too slow to follow her movements. And then came the sound. It was about 2:40 a.m. when she first heard it. A faint whistle. Not quite a tune, just a low, steady note that carried across the lot. The pumps were empty, the highway deserted. She froze, scanning the glass, but nothing moved. The sound cut off as if someone had clamped their mouth shut. The next night, same time, same note. This time, Maya stepped outside, arms folded against the chill. The lot looked empty, but the whistles seemed to circle her, slipping around from the dark edge of the trees, never close enough to catch. The following morning, she asked Cliff, the older man who worked days, if he'd ever heard it. His coffee mug stopped mid-air. He set it down slowly. "You heard the whistler?" Maya blinked. "You heard the what?" Cliff didn't answer. He just muttered, "Don't go looking for it," and walked off, leaving the mug half full on the counter. That night, she sat wired with exhaustion, every muscle clenched, waiting. Sure enough, 2:40, the whistle came again. Louder this time, vibrating in her chest like a string plucked too hard. By the second week, it wasn't just outside. It pressed against the glass, seeped under the door, slid along the aisles. Sometimes her chest tightened until she couldn't breathe, like someone was standing just behind her shoulder. And then, the bathroom. Greaves had told her to lock it after midnight. She always did, until one night she noticed a glow under the door at 3 a.m. Her stomach dropped. The key hung behind the counter where it always did. She crept forward, pressed her ear to the door. The faint hiss of running water. Maya's hand trembled as she turned the key. The sink dropped once, then stopped. The mirror was fogged, as if someone had stood breathing against it. Across the glass, smeared with wet fingers, were crooked shapes. Not random. Letters. The first three of her name. M-A-Y. Her heart stumbled. She slammed the door and backed away until her spine hit the chip display. When she told Greaves the next morning, he barked a laugh. "Pipes are old. Condensation. You kids spook yourselves too easy." But when Maya mentioned it to Cliff, he just rubbed his temples. "You ever hear of Darren Kreis?" he asked quietly. "Worked nights back in '99. They found him in that bathroom, locked from the inside. Heart failure, they said, but his face..." Cliff trailed off. "What about his face?" His eyes unfocused, like he'd been screaming for hours, but nobody heard him. The name burned into her. Darren. The whistle wasn't random anymore. It belonged to someone. After that, the messages in the mirror changed. Sometimes just smears like numbers, 99. Sometimes warped letters, S-T-A-Y. One night, clear as day, it read, "With me." That was the same night the front door's sensor beeped at 2:40. The glass slid open, cold air rushing in. No one walked inside, but the whistle coiled through the aisles like a thread pulled tight. A candy bar dropped from the shelf. Not random. Her favorite brand. Her hand shook so hard she dropped her keys twice before making it to her car. She sat, gripping the steering wheel, watching the lights stutter inside the store, listening to the whistle rise and fall like someone circling the building. The next morning, Cliff didn't laugh. He just sighed. He never left Maya. Some say Darren's stuck. Some say he warns people not to stay too long, but maybe, he hesitated, maybe he just doesn't want to be alone. She quit that week, told Greaves she couldn't handle the hours. He rolled his eyes and muttered about kids being soft, but she didn't care. Weeks later, sleep still didn't come easy. Sometimes she'd wake gasping, convinced she'd heard whistling outside her apartment window. Sometimes she dreamed of the station's bathroom mirror fogging over, her name scrawled across it by invisible hands. One night, after forcing herself not to drive past Route 9 fuel, Maya came home, emptied her jacket pocket, and froze. In her hand was a rusted key, heavy, stained, unmistakable. The bathroom key from Route 9 fuel. She dropped it on the counter, pulse hammering, but when she picked it up again, it felt warm. That night, when the wind rattled her window, she heard it again, Faint, steady whistling, as if someone was waiting just outside. And sometimes, God help her, she whistles back.
Some places aren't haunted by ghosts. They're haunted by the pieces of life people left behind, looping endlessly in the dark. Tonight's story is one of those places. This account comes from Daniel Reed, who at 31 thought he was just working another dead-end job. Instead, he found something upstairs that he wishes he had never seen. Daniel never planned on working nights. He used to think he'd be a teacher, maybe even a counselor. Something steady, something that mattered. But dreams wear down over time. After too many false starts and bills piling up, he found himself behind the counter at Miller's Gas, a lonely station off Route 17 in rural Kansas. The building was squat brick, with a flickering neon sign that spelled gas in half-broken letters. Customers were rare after dark, mostly truckers or the occasional straggler who looked lost. Franklin, the older clerk who split shifts with Daniel, warned him about two things: don't fall asleep and don't go upstairs. At first he didn't question it. The days blurred into nights. Cigarette sales, lukewarm coffee, long stretches of silence broken only by the hum of the coolers. But by his second week, the silence stopped feeling empty. It felt alive. The noises started small, faint clicking sounds overhead, like someone tapping on a typewriter. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing across the ceiling of the locked upstairs offices. And finally, the humming. A girl's voice, soft and steady, carrying a lullaby that made Daniel's skin crawl. It didn't make sense. That floor was supposed to be sealed decades ago. Franklin had even chuckled once, saying the upstairs was storage nobody wanted to touch. But the noises weren't random. They followed rhythms, patterns, like someone still working up there. One stormy night in February, Daniel's curiosity cracked. Rain hammered the glass, thunder rattled the roof, and the noises grew louder. Typing that rattled like frantic hands on keys, phones ringing in the dead of night, footsteps pacing above him, too deliberate to ignore. And always, always the lullaby. Daniel couldn't take it anymore. On the wall behind the counter hung a row of keys. Most were labeled neat: restroom, stockroom, shed. But one key was older, heavy iron, with a faded tag that read simply, upstairs. His heart pounded as he climbed the narrow staircase. Each step groaned, warning him back. At the top, the smell hit: mildew, rot, and something metallic, sharp like rusted blood. The key turned with a reluctant scrape. The door swung inward, and stale air spilled out like something exhaling. The office floor stretched before him, frozen in decay. Desks overturned, monitors cracked, paper scattered as though everyone had left in a rush decades ago. Water stains spread across the ceiling, a single fluorescent tube buzzing weakly overhead. But that wasn't what stopped him cold. On the thick dust covering the floor were fresh footprints, pressed deep, leading straight toward the far corner. Daniel's breath caught, and then he heard it. Footsteps, not his own, steady and deliberate. From the shadows at the far end, a figure emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly pressed dark suit that didn't belong in a place like this. His shoes gleamed, spotless against the grime. His face was pale, expression unreadable, his eyes lowered as if Daniel wasn't worth looking at. The man crossed the room with purpose, stopping at an old desk. He rested his hand on it, reverent, whispering something too soft to catch. Then he turned, pressing his palm against an elevator button on the wall. Daniel's stomach dropped. There was no elevator in the building. Never had been. But the button lit up. The man stepped forward, then vanished. Not faded, not walked away. Gone. Papers rustled across the ruined office, though no wind blew. The fluorescent tube flickered violently. Daniel stumbled back, his flashlight clattering to the floor. Panic surged and he bolted, slamming the door behind him, fumbling the iron key into the lock with shaking hands. The rest of the night he sat at the counter gripping cold coffee, his pulse refusing to slow. Every noise, every creak, every hum felt like footsteps overhead. When Franklin came in at dawn, he asked him, his voice cracked and desperate, "What's upstairs?" Franklin just looked at him for a long, quiet moment. His eyes softened, like he'd seen that same fear before. Then he said only, "Told you not to go." The noises never stopped after that. If anything, they grew louder. Typing that rattled like phantom fingers on keys, phones ringing in the dead of night, footsteps pacing above him, too deliberate to ignore. And always, always the lullaby. Daniel quit within the month. But even years later, he says storms bring it back. The smell of mildew, the phantom typing, the hum of a tune meant to soothe a child. And sometimes, when the wind rattles his windows, he swears he hears it again. Not outside, not above, but inside, humming through his own chest like a memory that never belonged to him but refuses to let go. Because some places don't just remember. They press themselves into you until you can't tell anymore if it's the building that's haunted or if it's you.